Welcome to another episode of Revenue Engine Masters, where I have monthly conversations with go-to-market experts about how they're building future-proof go-to-market strategies aligned around their customer, how they're optimizing their systems, their data, their processes to create a great buying journey, drive velocity, efficiency, and revenue growth. And today I'm thrilled to be speaking with Warren Zenna, the CEO and founder of the CRO Collective. Warren, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Adam, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation a lot.
Yeah, me too. Today, I want to talk around a theme that you've built the CRO Collective around, which is called the CRO Ready Org, and what that means. But before we do, I'd love our audience to get a little insight into your world and tell us a little bit about your background, goes back as far as you'd like, and the path that led you to founding the CRO Collective.
Sure, thanks. So I'm older than people think. I won't get into that, but let's say that I was, selling door-to-door newspaper advertising when I was about 21, 22 years old, So that was the way you sold back then. You had to sell, you had to go to talk to people live, And so I started just doing that. And I think probably early on, I sort of knew that I had a good sales gene in me, And then I drifted around a little bit. I did a lot of different things in creative space and stuff. But then around the mid to late 90s, I was fortunate enough to start working for a media company and selling advertising. And, the timing was good. I mean, I ended up just sort of working before the internet was created, so that when the internet was created, I was already in it. And I was able to adapt quickly to a lot of very revolutionary new ways in which businesses are being conducted. So I was there when the internet started, and then I was there with that was search, right? Social and online advertising. And then it got into mobile devices, right? When the iPhone came out, and I was right in the beginning of that. I was working very closely with a lot of people who were on the forefront of building marketing for advertising, and also just general creative services for mobile experiences. So I worked as an executive at two of the big advertising agency holding companies, Publicis Group and Havas. I was an executive at both those teams, and I built pretty big businesses there. But it got me connected to the ad tech world. So I was working when ad tech was created as an industry, and I got involved in it. So, wow, yeah, it was pretty interesting. So I was watching that happen, and there was a point at which I was a buyer, because when I was an executive at one of these agencies, I had a budget to spend because we were building products. I had to build a mobile ecosystem for an agency, and so I was given resources to buy services from ad tech companies. And those are all primarily, as you know, they're all SaaS startups. So I got very involved in that business a lot, and I was doing a lot of work with startups. And this is where a lot of the stuff started formulating, because the SaaS world created an interesting paradigm for businesses, because you were able to look at business models in a much more condensed way. Most companies at that time took a long time to grow. I mean, we really didn't have the kind of insights into how businesses were built then, because we didn't have the kind of data that we had right now. So all of a sudden now we're looking at these companies being built around models that you could share with people. This is how we're measuring things. Right? It was kind of fascinating. And a lot of the ways in which we conduct business today is being influenced by SaaS businesses. And this is a good and a bad thing, which we're going to talk about today. And so when you watch businesses like that, and you could observe them like that in a way that the model is so transparent, it informs the way companies go to market and other businesses. It just becomes a model, right? Particularly the SaaS business is very interesting in that it created billionaires very quickly, and that's attractive to the marketplace for many reasons. There's a lot of people within the financial ecosystem that benefit from that. Aside from the person that runs the company, there's the whole, VC and PE groups that just flock to this thing. And so there was this weird, interesting, we're going to look back at this really with a fascinating look, like 10, 15, 20 years from now, and say, imagine this time when this businesses occurred where there was this gravitational pull of dollars into this businesses segment. There's only like 30,000 businesses or SaaS businesses, right? If you look at that, the millions of businesses there are, but it informed everything. So it started to give us also a window into a couple other things, which is how businesses operate. It wasn't just like how they measure and how they make money, but just how does sales work? How does a accelerated sales organization grow? How does a sales organization drive revenue quickly? How do we build marketing, right? The words like attribution came into the marketplace, which is a new term that we got into a lot. How do you measure things? How do we know now the effort that we put into something that we can now determine what its direct impact was on things? And that also created a lot of false signals too, right? A lot of things weren't true. because attribution became an industry unto itself. So if I can provide attribution to companies, then I'm providing them a value that they need for transparency and the ability to report on investments. So why don't I create attribution models and attribution technologies and stuff? And it built an entire world around metrics and measurement that, in my opinion, screwed up a lot of the ways that people build businesses because they were focusing on the wrong things. What is the right thing? Well, the right thing, I think, should be customers and how happy they are with the things that they buy. And that's it. I mean, that's really pretty much how you should do it, right? I mean, I understand it has to be profitable and you have to make money and all that. Those are obvious things. But if that's all you're focusing on and not how customers feel, then you're not really running a business for the purpose of serving the community. You're building a business just to make money. And that's, I think, what happened. So I started seeing this, and the ways in which I saw it were the silos that were created between the marketing organizations and the sales organizations and the customer success organizations ostensibly became three separate groups, maybe even three separate businesses. And the way businesses are designed is they're almost designed that way from day one. And, the confounding thing is to watch people running these companies and wondering why it is that, we're churning customers, or why it is that we can't keep salespeople, or why it is that we can't do X, Y, and Z, without looking at the bigger picture, that the systemic problem that they created for themselves is that they basically created a business that is disconnected from its bigger purpose based on the way that we measure results and the way we do things. So this led me to understand that what's missing is a foundational change in the way companies are structured and managed and led by, instead of creating siloed leaders across different revenue functions, there should be one person who runs everything so that everything is integrated and aligned in a way that really should be. And I don't mean, when I say alignment, I don't mean, we meet and we collaborate and we get along with each other. I'm talking about real alignment where the metrics, the data, the processes, the actual operational components of a business are really seamless from the beginning of the time that a customer is first touched to the point at which the customer renews. And that's not occurring. And the chief revenue officer role is sort of the missing piece in this, because we'll get into this. The CROs are really pretty much been running sales and not really on being revenue leaders. And I thought, this has to be fixed. I can fix this. Why not? I mean, I can fix it. Why not? I'll try. So I created the CRO Collective with the intent to build a new way in which we bring more precision to the definition of the role of chief revenue officer, train people to become chief revenue officers, and then help founders understand how the role should be applied to their businesses so that they can break down those silos and create a more seamless and integrated business. That's a long answer, but that's basically how I got here. So that's what I did. 5 years ago, I started this. I'm doing it for 5 years now.
5 years.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thanks.
From newspaper delivery to
exactly
to CRO.
I was a taxi cab dispatcher.
I
was a furniture mover. I was a doorman. I was a bartender. I mean, I did everything. So it was fun. I had a great, fun life, man. I did a lot of crazy things. Well, one day we'll talk about all that stuff. I've had a nutty life. So
love it.
Yeah.
You keep referring back to the customer, their happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps, now we have all these metrics around attribution and maybe NDR and win rate and ACV and the ROSE metric and all that kind of stuff. What does it mean to be a CRO Ready Org? You talked about not just collaborating, but truly integrating around the customer.
Yes, I think there's a couple of things around there, right? So there's a lot of factors that go into this in terms of, let's say, creating a blueprint for what a CRO Ready organization is. So the first thing is, I think, a company first needs to, unfortunately, the issues that I addressed in my opening response to you are unavoidable. It's not like a company can avoid being misaligned. Misalignment is an inevitability, because in order for companies to grow, you have to create silos initially, because that's the beginnings of a company, right? I have to create a sales organization and I have to focus almost exclusively on customer growth. That's fine. But as the company progresses and as a company reaches a point of what I call operational complexity, there needs to be a point at which that older model of growth needs to change to a more systemic one. The problem is, when do you do that, right? That's a kind of a big riddle. What's the point at which I know it's time? So unscientifically, I've sort of figured out some things that indicate that. One thing is the size of the company, not necessarily just the amount of people, but really the amount of revenue. You could tie revenue numbers with complexity pretty easily. I would say, and I think most people would agree, I've been doing this long enough, that when you get over about 15, 20, even 25 million in revenues, you've reached a level of complexity where now you're a different business than you were when you're $1 or $2 or $3 or $4 million in revenue. You're not the same. But if you continue to run the business like you're a $1 or $2 million company, you're going to get in trouble. You can't. It's not the same thing anymore. And if that's the only blueprint that I have, it's going to wear out, right? So that's one thing. So there's recognition that I've reached this point of operational complexity, and it's a realization or a mindset that as a leader of the organization or the owner, I know that whatever we've been doing, I guess the mantra which I've heard before, not from me, is what got us here won't get us there, right? There's a sort of collective understanding if that's the case. That's number one. Number two is I recognize that we have a problem. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I know that we're losing customers. We can't keep them. We need to acquire more customers to keep our business going because the loss of customers is greater than the acquisition. So we find that we're putting too much emphasis on our sales organization to keep our business alive. That's the first sign that it churned, because that's not good. That means that I have to keep on putting more coal in the fire, and the engine is burning the coal faster than I can put the coal in the fire. So another part of the beginning of this journey for a company is a recognition that we have a systemic problem. We don't have a symptomatic problem. So if I think we have a sales problem, it's probably true. No different than if I have an inflammation problem, I probably have back problems. But that doesn't mean I have a back problem. That means I have an inflammation problem. And that's the distinction I'm trying to make here, right? So I could take back pills, or I can go to a back doctor, or I can go to someone that says, yeah, the problem is that you're eating all this crap and your body's fucked up and you need to eat differently, and that'll probably solve your back problem. And it seems counterintuitive, but that really is what's going on. And so if you don't want to do that, I can give you some pain for your back and it'll go away, but then you'll be taking pills for the next 20 years. And is that what you want? I don't think so. So that's the problem, is that we keep taking pills. And I think the pills are sales training, and sales enablement. These are the vitamins and the aspirins and the, Novocaine that we take to fix systemic problems. And they work enough that, there's a business around them. Much like the attribution models were created to help solve these problems, and they made a lot of money. And again, this isn't a knock on sales enablement. I think those are important things, but they become aspirin, or maybe even methadone, or maybe even opioids for problems that really are more systemic. So another part is that the leader has to go, okay, I get that. I get that I can keep spending money on fixing my marketing or fixing my sales. But what I really realize is that I have a systemic problem that I haven't been willing to address. And we can get into this even more. This is a bigger part of this conversation, is why won't I give it the attention that it deserves? I mean, we can ask the question, like, why is it that I don't eat better if I know I have inflammation, right? I mean, we all know the answer to that question because I like pizza, that's why. And so, so there's a lot of this stuff, but the point at which that realizations are made, and we'll get into that a bit more, then there's a recognition that we need a leadership change. We need someone who can help us to bring alignment to the organization, and we need to create a different way we operate. And now we need to do a deep dive on our real problem. So instead of going and getting a blood test, or just like a small, scratch test on my arm or something like that, I really need to spend the day in the doctor's office and get every reading, everything, an EKG, an MRI, so that I can get a real readout and find out what really is going on. And in the business side of that would be looking at your entire business revenue operation in close detail, looking at your compensation planning, looking at your profitability, looking at your cost acquisition costs, looking at your customer churn, looking at your pipeline growth, looking at the way that you manage your sales organization, looking at the way you capture leads, looking at your ICP. Are you identifying the right people? Are you selling to the right people? Are you charging them the right amount of money? What's your marketing spend? How is it attributed to sales? How do you know that? Like all these things, really deep. And once you figure all that stuff out, then you're in a position to say, okay, now that we know the gap between what we're doing and what we need to do, we're ready for a CRO who can come in and help us to kind of create an organization that solves those problems. And that's what you're ready for now. And so that's what a CRO Ready organization is. It's a company that's prepared for and understands that a systemic change needs to take place in the way they're running their business, and they need a leader to come in and be responsible for it. And they have a clear understanding of a dashboard of what it is that's wrong that they can start fixing. And they're willing to do it. That's basically it.
Admitting you have a problem, having throwing the ego out the door, and getting the data that's right.
You have to be 100%.
This may seem naive, but I feel like D2C, maybe direct to consumer and e-commerce, has nailed the buyer journey.
Yeah, they have.
Why hasn't SaaS gotten it?
I'll tell you why. Such a great question. Thank you, Adam. Direct to consumer is a consumer business. It's not a B2B business. It's a totally different type of thing. When I'm selling to people that want to buy shoes, we know how to do this. P&G figured this out 100 years ago. They're brilliant at it, Yeah. And we know how to do that. And we've got the best tools in the world today to create a new shoe and put it on Instagram and get people to buy it. I mean, we've really built an amazing machine for that. So I wouldn't look to DTC as the solution because that's not the right model. The problem is B2B businesses have a different set of problems. And that is that they have a much more complex way they have to sell things, right? They can't just have someone click on something. I mean, yes, we have, product-led growth and I can get the free dashboard and I can sign up for free for 14 days. But let's face it, that's a person at a company who gets the dashboard and then runs to their boss and says, I got this cool tool. Can we get it on the enterprise version? Now it's going to turn into a different sales conversation. Now I got to get 4 more people involved and it becomes a much more bigger thing. Or I want to get more seats and we want to spend this much money and let it evaluate the 7 other options out there. So I don't care how much product-led works. It works for the person, but if you want to sell it to an organization at an enterprise level, it's a different conversation. It becomes more complicated. That's one thing. Second thing is that, you can't rely on marketing as much. You can't just go out there and say, you need to do a better job of it, but you need really true understanding of the buyer, who you're selling to. And so, but the real issue, to answer that question, the real reason why B2B companies can't figure this out is because they're not incentivized to. And they're not incentivized to because most of the time, and I would say all the time, but most of the time they're funded somehow. They have a PE or VC organization that gave them money because they needed it, which is great. And then the money that they got comes with expectations, right? And demands that they have to adhere to that are understandable. Like if I give you $12 million to go build this thing, I'm going to want that money back in a certain period of time. I'm going to want you to spend that money a specific way based on the, managing model that we have according to our portfolio management system that we've developed that we feel makes a lot of sense. And our returns are acceptable enough to us that we can push it across all 20 of our portfolio companies and we get a pretty good return. So you may not be the winner, but 3 other will. So screw you. That's the way it's going to go. So we end up having this system that is sort of really strangely not designed for companies to look at things in this way because they're not incentivized to, So, that these are the challenges that these companies go through is that the way that we've set this up is that it's a lottery game in a lot of respects, because you and I both know that a lot of companies that made a lot of money and were acquired never really actually made any profit. And in many times have customers that don't like them. So, they won for different reasons and based on different metrics other than the way customers respond and stuff like that. And I'm not saying all of them. Some companies make incredible money because their customers are thrilled. But they put the time in to make sure their customers were happy and they probably had a model correctly. You look at Amazon is probably the perfect example. So I think the problem we have is we have just a large ecosystem of confluent factors that go into why B2B businesses are sort of almost in a way being incentivized to not focus on things that matter in the long term and are forced to focus on things that only matter in the short term. And that's not going to get you to a long-term situation most of the time. So this is sort of I think what we're looking at is a kind of a shift change in the way that we're looking at the way businesses are grown and how we need to look at things differently. The different types of businesses that we fund, the different kind of businesses that we're going to put in the marketplace, different kind of value. We haven't even got into technology and AI and how this is changing the way people can change things these days and how fast they can move off of products and move on to new ones. And they can evaluate things a lot quicker. So it's creating a lot more choices and options for the way people behave and buyers behave. And so it's harder and harder for SaaS companies to continue to succeed like they did 10 years ago. And I think we're starting to see the cracks in that model.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, and who suffers there? It's the customer that suffers.
The biggest loser.
The customer suffers. The biggest loser, and then you feel like software is like snake oil, Bessemer SaaS Cloud Index, you look at it, it tells us like mid-tranche SaaS companies right now are growing 12 to 15% year over year, not 30%. The top of funnel is suffering, NDRs, not where it used to be. And yet we keep getting bombarded with crappy, sales drone outreach. What are like the tactical, actionable things the most successful CROs that you're working with are doing to coalesce everything around driving an integrated go-to-market strategy around the customer while balancing those growth targets, being PE-backed or VC-backed, and sales velocity and new and expansion revenue while making that customer damn happy?
Yep. So the first thing they're doing is they have a very firm understanding of what their job is. And I think more importantly, they have a firm understanding of what their job isn't. So the issue we have right now is a CRO that comes in to a company today. They're very sort of flimsy, and I don't want to make a big statement about CROs because they're under a lot of pressure. If I'm a father of 2 kids and I have a house in the suburbs, and I want to move up in the ranks and I'm going to get a job that's a really good job, I'm going to say yes to the job if they offer me a lot of money, because why not? It makes sense. If the company's going to give me $500,000 plus some equity and maybe some bonuses and a CRO title, that's attractive. And I worked my ass off to get a job like that. I'm going to say yes to it, and I'm probably going to avoid asking tough questions that would indicate that this job really isn't what it says it is. So we have a lot of people that are being sort of led down a primrose path to take a job that many times is not defined properly. So good CROs are ones that know how to do that. They're looking at the job with different eye set. They're saying, look, wait a minute. Am I walking into a buzzsaw here? Am I going to take a job that is not setting me up to win because the way that they've modeled out their top-down revenue goals and their projections and all the other things that they're looking to do are unachievable, but they're going to ask me now to become responsible for them. And they're giving me very little room to do it. And so the good ones are, they understand how to accept the job differently. They're coming into the job as a consultant, and they're saying, look, guys, I know why you're doing this. I understand all the pressure you're under, and I get it. And you might not be willing to do it differently, but I'd like to offer another perspective on this. And that is that, what you really need is you need someone to run your entire revenue operation so that you can grow your business and not just go chase quarterly numbers every quarter, because you're going to run out of gas. It's not going to work. And you're asking me to do something that ultimately I'm going to be blamed for. And I have a process for this. I have a method for this. I know how to do it, and I can show you how, right? Those CROs come in with the right sort of like from the day one being real experts. And then what do they do? So now what they do is they break down the silos by creating systems, right? They look at the customer journey and they say, okay, so when customers in the marketplace, the first thing we have to identify is let's make sure that our ICP is right. I don't just mean your persona. I don't mean like, are we selling to the right title, right? Or the right industry? Because we know the answer to that question pretty quickly. We know that CFOs in the whatever industry buy our product. More importantly, are we selling to the right customer in terms of the way that they're buying and the way that they're renewing and the amount of money that they spend with us and the amount of time they spend with us and stuff? And we can start to look at enough backwards data to say, these customers represent customers who maybe spend less money on their initial purchase, but the cost of that customer goes way up, the value of it, because they buy more often, or they renew more often, or they upgrade to this particular type of product sooner than the other ones do. And what we're doing is we're chasing, this is an example, we're chasing customers that give us bigger tickets on the first sale without thinking about what they look like a year later, And so these are the sort of ways that a CRO can evaluate with a different set of tools about what types of customers they should be selling to, and moving off of the ones that are maybe more attractive in the short term, but better attractive in the long term. And then the second thing they're doing is they're also understanding how to delegate and lead revenue operation teams as opposed to running functions. And they also don't get sucked into sales. They don't start carrying a bag or closing deals or running sales organizations. They're very good about maintaining a firm footing on the strategic growth of the organization and delegating those things away to the people who are responsible for those functional teams, right? So this is like a CROs that succeed are ones that really know how to stay out of the weeds and be more systemic and be more strategic about growing revenue engines and building functional teams that work together and creating systems that make sense, looking at the technology differently, reevaluating the tech stack that we're using and how maybe it's giving us false positives, or it's focusing too much on sales metrics as the way that we run the company, right? Or it's not allowing us to understand how marketing spend is directly tied to a sale. These are the sort of things that CROs that are doing really well are doing good of. They also, lastly, they have an amazingly good relationship with their founder and their CEO. And they're in partnership with the CEO who understands this stuff and is supporting them in this stuff and understands this, right? The best example of this is watch Moneyball with Brad Pitt. This is the perfect example of a guy who ostensibly was the chief revenue officer of that team. And he came in and everyone was like, are you nuts? Get the fuck out of here. You're not going to hire these idiots. I mean, it was a really amazing example of someone who really understood exactly. I would say, in fact, actually, I would say that kid was the CRO. He was the CEO. That's the right sort of dynamic between those two people. And he had this kid who came to him and said, look, you got to do it differently. That kid was the chief revenue officer.
Oh, Jonah Hill.
Yes. He was
Yeah.
the one who really was the
Yeah.
CRO in this analogy. And he presented this founder, which was the manager, with this model. And the founder was wise enough to go, you know what, this makes sense. We're going to try it. And he had to get everyone in the company to agree to something that made no sense for pretty deep into the season. I mean, they were probably all the way close to the center of the season or the end of the season before the results started showing. And then when it did, it was even hard for him to attribute it to what he was doing. It's like everyone takes credit for everything, right? But the reality is that he knew he had a lot of faith in this model, and it ended up getting them to they almost got the pennant, right? I think they did. They got the pennant. You think at the World Series. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'm saying is they weren't even close to that in the season before. So, and the Red Sox decided that they'd adopt this model as a result of that. And they had a lot more money to implement it. But what he was able to do, maybe I look at myself as that guy. I'm certainly not freaking Brad Pitt, for Christ's sakes. But you know, what I mean is I'm sort of looking at this as like, how do we create a different way in which owners can look at the model of running their businesses so that they can change the paradigm of the way that they conduct teams, the way they construct their teams and their systems, because there isn't anyone that talks to me about this that says I'm crazy or that I'm not making sense. They're all saying this is perfectly logical, but there are very few people willing to do it. And the reason is because the forces around them are against them. They're not supporting it for many reasons that I already provided here. It's not an easy thing to do, but the companies that do it are successful and the CROs are successful. So, you know, I'm fighting uphill a bit, but it's fine. I mean, I'd rather do that than just jump in the water with everyone that's warm, because what the hell, do something that's more interesting and more fun. That's basically how I look at the world, you know?
The backgrounds and characteristics of a successful CRO, I heard 4 things: consultant, advisor, alternative perspective, really obsessing over why customers buy and why they continue to buy. In the baseball analogy, they want to see people on base. So on base percentage, let's focus on that, because on base means you're going to go around the bases and
if
get
we
to
have
home
the
plate
system
score
set
run.
up to get them from second to third or first to second, then we need to get them on first.
Yep. You need to get them on first.
You got to get them on. If we know we can get them to second and third, right? If we built a model where that happens often enough, then getting them on first would be a great first start, right?
Yeah. People want to go to the ballpark, see people on base and
home runs.
Get runs. So
you want to hit home runs.
So then it was that hyper customer focus. It was staying out of the weeds and staying true to the strategy, and then the relationship between CEO and CRO. That's
you got to beat the drum on that. Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. You said something earlier on. You said it last month when we spoke. You just said it earlier on. You said, what got us here won't get us there. In the absence of knowing what else to do, we do the thing we know how to do, which is kind of like insanity sometimes. So what are when people come into the CRO collective at first, what are those themes that they're talking about initially, the chatter in your community members? And then how do you see them evolve through your program? And what are those themes? How do those themes evolve toward the end?
Yeah, it's great. I think there's a pretty good percentage of people that come into my system and they say, I'm really glad you opened my eyes to this, because now I know that I don't want that job. I want to run sales. So thanks for clarifying that for me. I would never want this job. And I was pursuing it, and I'm not going to do that anymore. That's interesting, right? So it's fine. Okay, great. Good. Go forth and conquer and go run sales. We need great sales leaders, so go for it. And then the other ones are like, wow, this is amazing. This is really cool. I really want to do this. Thank you so much for sort of clarifying for me things that I wasn't able to articulate before. So that now, you know, it's like one of these things. I don't want to say, like, everyone brings up the Matrix example, but, you know, it's sort of like, you know, when you can't look at something the same way ever again. So one of the things that we do with our people in our group, and you can do this yourself, is start to look at, and I walk through this a lot with people. I look at chief revenue officer job descriptions on LinkedIn, and I show them like all the stuff that they probably didn't see before. Like, look at the way this is written, you know, like look at what they're really looking for. So it's framing out a different way of viewing the world, so that when I approach a company to get a job, I'm able to understand really what it is they're actually hiring for, and not all the gobbledygook stuff they hang around it to make it sound attractive. But what's the thing? The question I have my people ask is, what's the thing that you're going to measure my success on, such that, and I try and rephrase it a little more sharper point, is that if I didn't do that thing, you'd fire me for it. See, when you put that on there, you get a more specific answer. So if I say, what are you going to measure? I say, oh, we want you to make the company more money, Well, what's the thing that you'll fire me for if I don't do, right? They're going to say something like, well, we need you to kind of be involved in the sales process, or you're not going to, like you'll get more clarity from them. And here's the thing. Most of these companies don't really know the answer to that question as much as they think they do. So what you're doing is you're sort of challenging them on like making them really think about what they really want, It's almost like, when, you're dating a girl and she's begging you to marry her, you're like, what you're getting yourself into here? Like, why do you want me to marry you? Like, answer me that question. Like, what would you divorce me over, Because, if you don't think about that stuff, you're 7 years in and it's a nightmare, And I think you do have to be smarter. So what I hear a lot is I hear people saying, wow, like I have this whole armada of other questions and other ways that I can view this job that I didn't have before. And I know what to do about it now. Like I know how to start. I know what to do next. I know the kind of people I need to hire. I know the kind of relationship I have to have with my boss that I didn't know about before. I need to understand the founders and also the board and like what they want and like a lot of things that sort of expand people's awareness that helps them be, I think, more mature and have their eyes open better and a more sophisticated and more comprehensive understanding of what they're getting themselves into so they can understand the environment that they're buying into and they can do something about it.
Love that. What would you fire me over?
Yeah.
You talked a lot about evolving your mindset, resetting, being brutally blunt with yourself, that 360 kind of reflection as a company, as a team. What are you personally working on now to evolve?
Oh my God. I'm like I'll say it. I'm going to be 60 in 3 weeks. So I'm at a big reflection stage in my life, right? I'm like, what am I doing? Yeah. And like the other knuckleheads that I described earlier, I just took on a house and crap, that I can't afford and all that, which is fine. I like throwing my hat over the fence and figuring things out, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't make you feel like, what the hell am I doing? But it's good. It forces me to have to think. So one is like, okay, so what matters most? What's worth getting upset about and what's worth not getting bothered by? Like, how do I prioritize where my stress goes and my anger goes and my fear goes? And then the other thing I'm doing is I'm saying like, okay, and this is really important, I would say to people who are trying to be a CRO in any thing is, what are the things that I know I'm really, really, really so good at that I'm probably one of the best at? And what are the things that I should never do because I'm so bad at it? And if I can get that as clear as I can, and then only do the things that I'm really amazing at most of the time, then I'm going to succeed most of the time. And stop saying yes to things that I'm either just okay at, and there's too many other people that are better at it, or things I'm so bad at that I should never say yes to it. So it's like staying in that zone of power, even if it's thin, because if you're the best at something, that's deep enough that you'll be able to provide a lot of value on it. And I think I made the mistake a lot of times of trying to do too many things a lot. And now I'm focusing on, quite frankly, this. I know I'm really good at this. I can have conversations like this very effectively. And I know that I can articulate things really well. And I know that I know how to like get people to understand things better than most people can. And I know they have a really good idea. So I should be doing that more often. So I'm working more on that.
Love it. Warren, I appreciate you spending time with us today. Being personal, professional, talking about your org, what a CRO Ready Org means, and the way we need to evolve our mindsets as companies, teams, individuals. And one thing I've learned, I'm 47, is that it's okay to not know what
whippersnapper.
Yeah, God bless me, right?
Yep.
I'm a whippersnapper. One thing I've learned is it's okay to not know what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah, 100%.
But
that's
just
right.
going through that process of learning to say, you know what? Oh shit, I thought I wanted to become a CRO and I don't. That is totally fine.
It is. It's a great
people
outcome.
Should embrace that. Yeah, it's a great outcome. Yeah, you get clarity. So
yep.
I appreciate it, Warren. Thanks for spending time with us today in Revenue Engine Masters, and I look forward to maintaining contact.
100%, Adam. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate the conversation so much.
You.
Thank you.